Great to be here with you on this Wednesday. It's not Wednesday, it's Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. I'm forgetting days already. We're back in the saddle. That's how we know things are going well. We've got a lot to get to. Brooks Austin will join us next hour. Dogs Daily on SI. We'll look at the University of Georgia heading into 2021. And does it all come down to Clemson right out of the chute to help the Dogs' case? We'll get to that coming up in hour number 2. Also, Nick Fitzgerald, former Richmond Hill Wildcat, Mississippi State Bulldog, NFL, XFL quarterback, will join us. We'll get his thoughts on NIL. And, man, BJ Ben, back in his playing days there in Starkville, could he have potentially cashed in there on some NIL dollars back when he was running things for Mississippi State Bulldogs? We'll talk to him about that coming up in just a little bit. But the universe was not happy last night. The Braves could have gotten back to 500, and it just simply cannot stand in 2021. So the Braves lost to the Pirates 11-1, and now they're 2 games below 500 again in the 2021 season. So tough one last night to lose to a team that's just quite frankly not very good, but that puts all the importance now on tonight and tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah, I still think you feel like you're clearly the better team and should win the next couple of games, including tomorrow afternoon, the getaway day game. But it's disappointing, Kevin. And I think to kind of spotlight one player in particular, and granted, to be fair, in an 11-1 loss, there's not a whole lot going right anywhere. But I look at Max Fried, and I know Max had the great moment at the plate, a couple of nights ago. But I look at Max Fried, and I look at a stat line of 7 hits, 6 earned runs, couple of walks, and Kevin, that's just not ideal. I think we all think of Max as potentially being that front end of the rotation guy, a number 1, maybe a number 2 at worst when he's right. And last night against an offense that on paper is not very good, you struggled, especially the later you got in the game, and maybe you were in too long. I don't know. I mean, you gave 5 innings, but you give up 6 earned runs, Kevin, and you weren't very economical in terms of throwing strikes. And now if you look at Max's ERA, it's up near 4.7. And against that team, I think that was disappointing given that the Pirates, again, on paper, and I understand the point you were making in the show meeting. Look, even in situations like this where you have a really bad team, they're still going to win almost 70 games probably, or 60 games. But I thought Max Fried's struggle yesterday was a little disappointing, in addition to just the bats all the way through not being very consistent.
No, I mean, Kevin, something we talked about before, at the end of the show yesterday, the Braves playing down to bad competition. This is the same Braves team that I keep on going back to be able to beat Bauer, be able to beat, DeGrom, be able to beat Kershaw. And then you look at last night, you say to yourself, all right, we were kind of talking them up too much. This team, this is one of the worst offenses in the majors. The Pirates just can't get anything going. And you look up 11-1. BJ, I do agree when you start thinking about Max Fried. I mean, I know that it's a lot more pressure on him because of what he did in a sample size season last year. People thought he should just be able to, bring that momentum into 2021. Hasn't been the case. Hasn't been himself all season. And kind of showed his ugly face yesterday, Kevin. You're gonna have to tell me what should I go off when you talk about a team like the Braves, for which it's almost like when it comes to the Mets, when it comes to that division, they finding a way to keep it close. And then when they play a team like the Pirates, they got the doors blown off them last night. I mean, 11-1 with an offense that couldn't. I think didn't the Pirates score more runs last night? They scored like the last 5 games combined. So for me, I just think it's a case of the Braves braving themselves and not playing down to however you want to say it out, braving. Not playing up to their potential last night, but yeah, it is one loss.
Is that like Clemsoning
and braving, but I do think Christian Kevin and BJ it is disheartening because good teams find a way to beat up on bad teams, not play down to bad teams. Hopefully they get these next 2, because like you said, Kev, you want to get 2 out of 3, could have been 3 out of 3, but obviously the Pirates are still showing that, hey man, we still get checks, we're still pros, and we can go out there and still have a good showing, even if it's one night against them Braves.
Sure. I mean, look, I think it stinks losing to the Pirates, but again, they're a team that's going to win their 60 games. One of them last night was against you. I think the goal going in, 2 out of 3. Now you've got to win 2 out of 2. Basically, it's where you look at this series for Atlanta. But I do agree, anything worse than that, and you are kind of playing down to the competition. And you talk about the Pirates at this point. I mean, if you're a professional baseball player playing in places like Arizona, Pittsburgh, BJ, you say, man, the Pirates are not good. Well, they do have good players. And what are those guys on the other side doing? Hey, trade deadline is coming up in a couple of weeks. You don't go to contenders to get players. They come to Pittsburgh. And look at me. Look at how I'm playing right now. I could potentially get traded to a contender if I can continue to play well. So I think you are seeing guys out there playing well for the Pirates. I think last night was disappointing. It was a game you felt like you should win, had an opportunity to win, and it got away from you and got ugly, which will happen from time to time. But again, I think anything less than winning the next two games at this point is just unacceptable for the Braves. Look, Marlins, Pirates, Marlins, we talked about this. You needed to go something like 7-2 in these 9 games. You still have the ability to do that, but 7-2 is a really solid finish to the first half of the season, especially given the Mets are playing the Brewers and some teams that you would think they aren't just going to roll roughshod over and win, 3 in a row against all the time. So these are huge games for Atlanta starting tonight with Ian Anderson. You got to go out and play much better. And I actually think outside of last night, the starting pitching has been a lot better over the last 2 or 3 weeks. Your offense has just been non-existent. I mean, we kind of had a throwback to the 2020 Braves where, they waited to a late date to come back on the Marlins. And then, Max Fried gets the walk-off and they're able to pull it out. Otherwise, they lose 2 out of 3 in that series. But the offense, to me, has been the bigger problem over the course of this series. And I know you could say, well, you're missing Marcell Ozuna and some other guys, but this is still a team as constituted that should be scoring you more than 2 runs a night in a lot of games. And that's kind of been some of their struggles at times, BJ and Ben. So I think this team is okay. They're around a 500 team. And I think that's about all you can say about it, BJ. Is this team great? No. Could they be? Maybe. Are they bad? No. Could they be? Maybe. If they don't get their act together. So I think right now you're riding the roller coaster of what it means to be a 500 team. I saw somebody say this earlier today on Twitter. If you're a fan, would you just rather the team stink and just be like, man, we're going to win 60 games and lose 100? And that's what we are. And we're rebuilding for the future. Would you rather be that side, win a whole bunch of games, be a 100-win team? Or would you rather be stuck in the middle where you're a 500 team? And this is what happens when you're a 500 team. You win some, you lose some, probably don't have a lot of big streaks either way on the winning, but you never really get a lot of traction. I think we see that in the NFL. A lot of times your 8-8 teams, BJ and Ben, are teams that are just kind of like, I mean, they beat some of the teams. They beat the teams they were better than, probably didn't beat a whole lot of teams that they weren't, and probably never won more than about 1 or 2 games or in sequence over the course of the whole season. And I think that's what you're dealing with Atlanta right now.
Yeah, and I think to be fair, if you look at the record over the duration of this season, I'm not sure you've been a 500 team. I think for a couple of days you've been a 500 team. I think for the vast majority of the season, and granted it's the first half of the season,
well, I mean, you've hung around that kind of mark most of the season.
Yeah, but you've been a below 500 team. I mean, for much of the season, you've been 2, 3, 4 games below 500. And I think you've been at times a below average team with the potential to be better. But it's interesting, Kevin, because, you talk about these games against the Marlins and the Pirates. And I think it's natural for us, just because those teams on paper aren't very good, to look at those games and not think they're dramatic or consequential, when in reality, the opposite is true, because these are the games you're supposed to win with regularity and kind of make that transition from being an average team or a below average team to an above average team. This is kind of the springboard for that. Like you said, can you go 7-2? Can you sweep a series? That's a chance to improve yourself entering the All-Star break, give you some momentum, and maybe prepare you for a challenging span of games on paper. I mean, to Ben's point, at times you've played better against these teams, but you open up the second half with Tampa Bay and the Mets and Philadelphia and the Nationals. It's going to be a challenge to open up the second half of the year. Maybe that brings out the best of you, but these games are very important. When you lose a game like you did last night to a team that's terrible, it's a missed opportunity, and it's going to happen. I agree with you, Kevin. I don't think the expectation should have been go 9-0, but I think 7-2 is realistic. And when you look at the NL East, surprisingly, it's a lot more sort of on edge than maybe we anticipated. The Braves right now are a win away from second place. They're also a loss away from fourth place. So you're right there kind of in that middle tier with Washington and Philadelphia. And not only do you have to make up ground with the Mets, but you don't want to find yourself in fourth place either, because now you're talking about another team and another team that has to lose games for you to move up in the standings. So this is a pretty defining part of the schedule for Atlanta entering the All-Star break. And I know these games don't have a lot of national appeal because the Pirates and the Marlins aren't very good, but they better matter to you. This has got to be where Atlanta makes some progress in the standings.
Yeah, and you hope that Atlanta, takes care of business so that you can go into the All-Star break feeling like you got a chance coming out of the All-Star break. I mean, I try to stay away from teams that stink in major sports. I mean, pro sports, because they're still pro sports teams. I mean, the Pirates, on paper, yes, the Braves should go out there and get a big win. Well, those guys get a paycheck too. They play with a lot of pride, and the Braves show too that they're not good enough to look past anybody. I don't know what it is, Kevin. Every time they get ready to go 500, oh, here it comes. It's like, hey, man, we got a chance to go 500. I think they've done that all year. They'll lose that game no matter what team it has been. But expectations, should be high when you talk about this Braves team. They good enough to beat anybody, and unfortunately, they not good enough to go out there and look past anybody. I think that they do get these next two. You hope they get these next two. Max Fried hasn't been himself all year. The offense, I mean, BJ, these correction games, 21 runs, and then I wish it wouldn't have came against a Pirates team, because you don't want a bad team to build confidence against a good team, and you want a good team to go out there and beat up on a bad team. Unfortunately, last night you couldn't tell who was good and who was bad if you look at the final score. I hope this Braves team gets back to their winning ways tonight, because like I said, you got the Marlins coming up before the All-Star game. You want to go into the All-Star game feeling good, not, oh, God, man, we got to scratch and claw, come, because we 5 games back, 6 games back of the Mets. But we'll see what happens. It is one game. I mean, like I said, I get my panic meter from Kevin. If Kevin is good, I'm good. But I got to ask Christian. Hey, Christian, did Kevin text you tonight to say, hey, man, it looks bad, man. I don't know what's going on. I got to get a second opinion these days from Mr. Gokel, but so far so good.
I mean, yeah, last night was not good, but I don't think there's any reason to just, go bananas or anything. I mean, geez. I mean, no, it's look, this is a team that needs to win and find some consistency. And I think this is to BJ's point, this is a natural point to do that. You're playing teams that aren't good. I mean, that's anybody would get excited about that if you're trying to turn your season around. It's like, hey, if you're, South Carolina, you're like, hey, man, you've got Kentucky and, Southwest Missouri State, no offense. And so the next 3 games, you should be looking at it going, guys, we got a chance to win our next 3 games. Like that's how you should be looking at it. So I think for the Braves, it's natural to be frustrated, because, look, this is an opportunity to really get a positive run going, and to have it kind of fall apart in what has been 2021 fashion was, a little disappointing last night to see that unfold. But BJ, on the other front, before we step aside here in the first segment, we'll hear Nick Fitzgerald about 25 minutes. Nate McMillan, Hawks get him for 4 years. Yesterday, locked that up. Ben and I talked about it yesterday on the show. Want to get your thoughts on Atlanta now that they're out of the postseason. Like, first piece of business, they got Nate McMillan locked in for the next 4 years.
Yeah, great move. Yeah, you knew this was priority number one. I know you want to add to your roster and maybe bring in a free agent or two, but you had to sign up Coach Mack for an extended period of time. Coach McMillan did an amazing job. What a dream season for the Hawks, the best season in Atlanta Hawks history. He had a great feel for the roster, got younger guys to develop, got role players to buy in, kind of changed the dynamic of the way the Hawks were playing offensively, defensively. There's a confidence to this team that I think is in large part because of Coach McMillan. So I heard you guys say that this was priority number one, and I agree. Get your coach in. Now you know that he sets the standard. He has the vision. He's going to continue to, I think, maintain these high expectations of advancing in the playoffs. So great move. You had to do it, and great that that's done.
Yeah, and the Hawks get it done yesterday afternoon. 4 years, he's going to be the head coach moving forward. We've got more to come. Nick Fitzgerald, as I mentioned, going to join us in about 25 minutes here on the show. But when we come back, speaking of the NCAA, they've been in the news a lot. They're still in the news now. What should they do now that name, image, likeness is passed as it relates to things that have already happened? We'll get to that next. It's 3 and Out, Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Welcome back, 3 and Out here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin BJ and Ben. Nick Fitzgerald going to join us coming up here in about 15 minutes on 3 and Out. We'll talk to him, former Richmond Hill, Mississippi State star, about name, image, likeness. How good would that have been for him if that was in place? And now that we see athletes taking advantage of it, a lot of athletes saying, well, man, back in my day, I probably could have they all get to sound like the old guys now. Because back in my day when I played, I could have made a lot of money doing that. But we'll talk to Nick Fitzgerald about that coming up in just a little bit. But speaking of back in the day, big move out there for Reggie Bush to get his Heisman Trophy back. And the Heisman Trust said, look, we're not doing anything. And I think actually I've seen a couple stories that said the Heisman Trust said, look, we're not even corresponding with Reggie Bush and his family. We'll reinstate his trophy if the NCAA reinstates his records, his season, essentially from 2005, which for all intents and purposes doesn't exist for right now. So, BJ, where do you think this is ultimately heading? Is he going to get it back at some point? I know he gave it up, voluntarily gave it to him back in the day, but do you think they give it back? Sounds like they have thrown, like a lot of people, thrown the ball in the NCAA's court and let them deal with it. If they give all the records back, then the Heisman Trophy comes back as well.
Yeah, I think ultimately it'll all come back. And, it's Kevin, I've heard you talk about this before, right? With the kind of the forfeiting of stuff. And you think about Georgia Tech and what happened, back in 2008 with their ACC championship that was basically forfeited over $100 or whatever it was, $40 or whatever it was. I mean, I was at that game where Georgia Tech beat Clemson for the ACC championship. So I remember it. And it's to that point, Kevin, where if you ask most people our age, right, like who's the most exciting or name the 2 or 3 or 4 most exciting college football players you've ever seen, they're going to say Reggie Bush, and they're going to remember the moments and the plays and the kick returns and the catches and, the runs that we've all watched on YouTube hundreds of times. I mean, we saw it happen. I mean, we have memories that are still vivid from his career. His career, when you think about Reggie Bush, I mean, he's probably one of the most memorable players in the history of the game, just from the standpoint of the excitement and, kind of being one of those athletes that sort of revolutionized the replay. Like, hey, go on YouTube and watch this play 100 times over and ooh and ah. Yeah, I understand that there were some things done that were against the rules. Clearly, we all know that. I think that's been gone over. But I do think there's kind of a public momentum to get some of that stuff back. And I think he will get, I guess, his stats and records back and the Heisman Trophy back. But it goes back to, Kevin, what I heard you say just a long time ago when I was in, college, I think, talking about I'm just saying, I'm not trying to say you're old, but you would always say it's not like we didn't see the player. Like, it's not like we didn't remember the big plays. It's not like you can go tell somebody, hey, erase all of your memories of Reggie Bush highlights or don't think about this great play. So I think it's coming back. I think, Reggie Bush is one of the most dynamic players ever. And I think a lot of people still have memories from that championship game, from the game against Notre Dame, from, the late night games against Pac-12 teams, maybe you wouldn't otherwise stay up for. So I think there's momentum out there. I think he's going to get it back.
Should the NCAA reinstate it? Yes, I think they should. I mean, and I think that the NCAA waiting on, waiting for something better to happen for them to reinstate them. I think it's kind of like showing that the NCAA, they never want to be out front. I do agree, BJ. When you start talking about breaking the rules in college, the rules and regulations of the NCAA it looks like a Yellow Pages in Atlanta. It is thick. It is a lot of rules in there. But when I started thinking about breaking the rules, right? Did he take a sports enhancement drug? No. Did he put something in his body that would make him, have an athletic advantage against somebody? No. Reggie Bush, we saw Reggie Bush play live on the East Coast. They made sure that you saw how great this guy was. I understand the different things that he did, his family, him taking money, his family moving to LA so they can watch him play. But look at what he did. He gave it back out of good faith. I'm just going to give it back. And then the Heisman Trust obviously, end up getting it, and now they're going to wait to see. It's always bothered me. And BJ, we were talking about this and before the show. if we really went through and looked at things that, student athletes did that went against the rules, you would probably have a lot of players, quote, giving their records back. Something else to say, it is not easy to be good in college. It is not easy to be relevant in college. It is very, very hard to be great. Reggie Bush was great. Reggie Bush was one of the best players to ever come through college, regardless of school and regardless of position. But, yeah, I hope that they do give it back to him, because I just think that, who are you going to give it to? Give it to Vince Young. Give it to Matt Leinart won Heisman. It's not like he didn't play with great players. But, yeah, Kevin DeBeach, I do hope they give it back to him. And God forbid the NCAA say, we're not going to wait. We're just going to give it back to him, because I don't know. He was trying to. The
Heisman Trust is the one that controls the Heisman Trophy. Like that's not the NCAA, but they are basically saying the NCAA, as of right now, says he was ineligible in 2005. We're not giving our Heisman Trophy to a guy who was not eligible. That's part of their mandate, and I guess well within their right to stick by it. As I see it, if the NCAA reverses their opinion, which a lot of people think they should now, given what's coming with college athletics, then I think the Heisman Trophy said we'll give it back to him. But I think that's just how they're viewing it, is by our bylaws, it has to go to a eligible student athlete. So if he is not eligible, he's not going to get it back. I think that's basically their take on it. Go talk to the NCAA if you want it reinstated. It's kind of what the Heisman Trust has kind of said there.
Yeah, and you're obviously in a time in college athletics now where there's kind of a reintroduction of amateurism and new name, image, likeness, clearly opportunities that, you talk about some of the violations of the past, that things that are now allowed and encouraged, would have cost you some eligibility, obviously not long ago. So, Kevin, you made an interesting point too, talking about how the Heisman has basically said, yeah, we're going to see what the NCAA does. I don't know if this is, given all that's going on in college athletics, does the NCAA view this as a major priority right now? Does the NCAA feel like this is something they have to address tomorrow, or are they kind of consumed with everything else they have going on?
They're going to wait until the season when Reggie Bush is back on TV working. I think, I can't remember the network he works for, but he's going to be on TV covering college football, and he's going to come up every day. Hey, Reggie, man, speaking of your Heisman. Hey, Reggie, speaking of your Heisman. And if you don't think that the court of public opinion or social media, drives, these executives to make these decisions, go out there and give him his Heisman. I will say this, and BJ, you can fact check me, which I know you will. There are a few things in this life that will not be pawned off. There are a few things. I'm not going to talk to you about, rings given to you in college football, because, well, I might have tried to pawn mine a day or two, and then when I saw my teammates already pawn theirs, I didn't want to answer theirs. But I'm going to say this. You're never going to walk into a pawn shop. You're never going to go on eBay and see a Heisman Trophy up.
I don't know. Wait. Didn't OJ actually do that? Did he sell his?
No. OJ did not. OJ did not sell his. It was stolen from him, and somebody tried to sell it. That is
different.
He actually went to jail because he went to go steal his stolen stuff back. But I just think that it's prestigious to win the Heisman, man. That's prestige that lives on forever. Give the man back his Heisman. If I'm Vince Young, which I'm not, if I'm Matt Leinart, which I'm not, I wouldn't want it given to me because I didn't win it. Because the guy who won it wasn't eligible. Come on, man. Reggie Bush is that dude. Get that man back his Heisman. Heisman Trust. Stop. Stop saying we got to wait on the NCAA. No, you don't. Get the man back his Heisman. Do the right thing.
We've got more to come. Nick Fitzgerald, he will join us, former Richmond Hill Wildcat, Mississippi State Bulldog, and NFL, XFL quarterback will join us next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad you were with us here on this Tuesday. Of course, name, image, likeness has come into play here in college athletics and going to be beneficial for a number of student athletes, and could have been very big for one of our athletes here in coastal Georgia back during his time. Nick Fitzgerald, former Richmond Hill Wildcat, Mississippi State Bulldog, NFL, XFL quarterback. He joins us here on 3 and Out. Nick, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Glad to be on.
Hey, doing fantastic. I mean, as big as things got for you there at Mississippi State with all that's happened the last couple of weeks in college football, did you find yourself looking back going, man, I wish I had some of this back when I was at Mississippi State?
And I feel like my class, like the class of 2014, kind of got messed up by the NCAA. I mean, our first year coming into college, they stopped making NCAA football. Can't see yourself on a video game. First year I'm about to start in 2016, they take away being able to buy individual jersey numbers. So I never got to see a whole crowd of people wearing number 7 jerseys. And then I leave college and they start paying people. I mean, come on now. Like, I would have had a great time being able to advertise myself in college and make money off of it. But, you know, it's a good thing it happened. I'm glad for the guys who are in college now who are going to get to make money off their name. But I'm scared these kids are going to sign their souls away without knowing it.
I was going to say, how do you see this kind of evolving? Because there are so many opportunities out there. I know you've told us before what it's like being a star quarterback, a starting quarterback in the SEC. How do you manage everything you already have going on and then manage being a business person as well?
You know, I think it's going to take, colleges hiring people and it being their job to just handle media and advertising, everything for these players. Because honestly, I mean, going through it, you're playing in the SEC, being a starting quarterback. I mean, like, you didn't have time to sleep, much less worry about tweeting out some product or creating your own brand of clothing line, which is just going to take away from, being the best player you can be. So I think it's just going to take colleges stepping up and hiring people to help, and athletes realizing, when they need to lock in on sports and when they can take some time and think about their brand.
And Nick, obviously, the player you were as a senior is far different than the player you were as a freshman because of your knowledge of the game. You think about name and image likeness, as you mentioned. Yes, you get an opportunity to benefit, but you don't understand the financials of these situations. You got somebody negotiating on behalf of you. How much does the financial side these players going to have to really donate some time to? Because at the end of the day, it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep.
No, I agree, man. I agree. It's going to take, I hope all these kids, the big name guys, they get accountants, they get people that are going to manage their money for them, someone they can trust that's not their aunt and uncle or something like that, which a lot of people do. And then, money just starts going missing and it starts getting bad. So I just hope that, colleges are helping these kids to be smart. They're pushing for them to have people managing their money for them. They're pushing for people to be giving that responsibility of building their brand kind of to someone else and just letting them allow them to focus on football. But I think these first couple of years, you're going to see, a lot of people not understanding how to handle all this and how it's all going to work out for them in the future. And like I said, I just hope these kids don't sign away their souls without knowing it.
Nick Fitzgerald joining us here on 3 and Out. And Nick, you got Mike Leach there in Starkville. Came right out of the gate with a big win. Obviously, 2020 was crazy, but how do you think that's going to continue to work there in Starkville with Mike Leach and the air raid?
I mean, it's the SEC. The best defenses in college football are there. You go against them every single week, especially in the West. I think if they can just get some solid receivers in there, I think that's just something that Mississippi State has been lacking on in probably the last 4 or 5 years, is just having a really solid group of receivers that can go make plays, can stretch the field, run good routes, have good hands, and they have a quarterback to sling it to them. So I'm excited to see what happens. I mean, obviously, I don't know what's going on in the program. I don't really talk to too many people to kind of get the feel for what they want to do. But as a super fan and as an alumnus, obviously, I hope they go undefeated and do big things. So I'm just excited to see what happens, though.
And obviously playing in the SEC West is just crazy when you think about the Alabamas and LSUs and A&Ms and, you guys and Ole Miss, just everybody. What's it like trying to make it week to week and play those teams and play in those high-profile games every single week when you're in the best division in football?
Well, it's a mindset kind of thing. You just have to really just sit there, look yourself in the mirror, and tell yourself you're the best one in this conference. You're the person that's going to lead this team on to greatness. And a lot of Advil and ice bath, man. That's pretty much how I made it through.
And Nick, obviously, your career, speaks for itself. The all-time leading rusher as a quarterback in the SEC. The career you went on to have, past college things you're doing now. But you were a part of something that most people don't give a lot of credit to, and that's the Egg Bowl. The Egg Bowl is something that most people, we get caught up in different traditions. What is the Egg Bowl like? And how much disdain did y'all have for them guys from Ole Miss?
Growing up in Savannah, obviously I was around the, Georgia, Florida, Georgia Tech. I saw Auburn, Alabama. You know about Ohio State, Michigan up in the north. But I just think that a lot of people don't understand like the true hatred that there is in that state. All you have is college football in Mississippi. So you have violent, extreme fans that there'd be fights in the stands, fights in the tailgates. And then that's just between the fans. Once you get to the players, it just seemed like a lot of these dudes grew up together in Mississippi. They ended up going to Mississippi State and Ole Miss, and then all of a sudden, just everything that was your childhood best friend is gone, and you just got to hate the guy. And as much as it sounds weird, it is that way. It's probably the most or top two nastiest rivalries in college football is based off of how physical that game is played, how many cheap shots are thrown in that game. And, how many fan fights are going to be outside.
Nick Fitzgerald joining us here on 3 and Out. And, Nick, recently, right before the pandemic, obviously you were in the XFL, man. Describe playing there because it looked like you were having a whole lot of fun playing in the XFL and being a part of that league. And I know they're trying to get it to come back. But just describe what that was like as opposed to any other league you've played in and what they were trying to do.
And, honestly, I would say the XFL is probably the most fun I've had while playing football. I joined my team very late, like a week before the first game of the season. So, didn't really get an opportunity to go up there and really compete for a starting job and get a ton of playing time. But if the season had progressed like it was going to, I was going to get playing time. I was going to have no packages put into play. So, I wasn't really worried about that. But, just everything apart from that, guys, we had our own facilities. It was NFL facilities, but guys are just there having a great time. The coaches there having a great time. Everyone's laughing, joking, just enjoying being able to play football again and it not be just so cutthroat business like it was in the NFL. And honestly, it was awesome. It was a great time. I really hope they bring it back, and I hope the Rock does it right and keeps that thing going.
Nick, wanted to ask you about playing for Dan Mullen, a guy who's had a lot of success with a number of different quarterbacks, yourself, Tebow, Dak, just to name a few. What was it like learning from him and playing for him and having so much production along the way?
I have a ton of respect for Dan Mullen. He's by far one of my favorite coaches I've ever played for. He was a very straight shooter, which is something that I very much appreciate. I don't want to be lied to. And my first day on campus, before I even accepted my offer and committed, looked me in the eye and said, "There's going to be plenty of days you're going to hate me, but I'm going to work my ass off to make sure that you're the best quarterback you could possibly be." And from that day forward, just he's been a great coach, even though he left the senior year. It is what it is. Phenomenal quarterback coach, an extremely intelligent and smart guy when it comes to the X's football. Just a little bit kind of bipolar from time to time. But, you can overlook that for how good of a coach he is.
And, Nick, playing at Mississippi State, big-time college football, in the SEC West. Most people only get to see what you had a chance to go out there and do. Most kids growing up playing high school football would love to be in your position. But what is it like? I know you was able to go out there and have tremendous success, but a lot of pressure was placed on your young shoulders to go out there and, with everything that you got done. What would be your advice to quarterbacks now, trying to play major college football? Because the position is changing. Obviously, the terminology and different things are changing, but the pressure seems to be staying the same.
Yeah, I mean, if I had any advice for kids starting middle school and up, every day do something, just a little bit of something, whether it be a little bit of footwork, a little bit of throwing, throw on Madden, play against the computer simulated game, pause it, look at what coverage they're in, talk about it. Just don't take a day off or think that college is so far away. I have plenty of time because man, that stuff sneaks up on you so fast. Um, like you said, the terminology does change a little bit. They want guys that can do both, but every team's going to take a guy that can stand in the pocket, deliver good passes, and can talk about the game and come off on the sideline and tell you what he's seeing and tell you why he's making the decisions he's making. So I would say just every day do at least a little bit of something. Don't take a day off. Don't think it's too far away. And I promise you're going to blink, and now you're done with college and done with the NFL.
Nick Fitzgerald, our guest here on Three and Out. Nick, what are you up to finally? What are you doing now? I know obviously last year in the XFL, they're trying to bring that back, or is that something you're trying to be a part of, or what's kind of your journey right now?
So I got done playing out in Houston in the spring league a couple of weeks ago. That was a cool experience. Glad I could go back out and play a little bit more football. Currently, what I do though is I'm a real estate agent. Me and my partner flip houses here in Tampa. So, definitely went a different way than I ever thought I was coming out of college as a finance major. But I got around real estate and I got around my partner and started learning the house flipping, kind of the business of it, and fell in love. And it's just something that I think I'm going to be doing for a very long time. If football comes back around and, I get an invitation to go somewhere, still ready to go, still work out every day, still run, still canoe. But mainly just kind of focused on building our empire up here in Tampa, and hopefully spreading out to the rest of the country.
Nick Fitzgerald, our guest here on Three and Out. Nick, always a pleasure, man. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for having me on.
Appreciate it. Nick Fitzgerald joining us here on Three and Out, all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. And again, BJ, a guy that back in his time at Mississippi State, probably would have cashed in pretty nicely there in Starkville with the name, image, likeness that's just recently been passed.
Oh, for sure. Superstar quarterback at Mississippi State with the wins and the records and the highlights. He had a lot of those highlights on YouTube where, you're going back and watching it like we were talking about almost, with Reggie Bush. Here's Nick Fitzgerald running over a guy in the open field and, it's going viral. So, yeah, great player and absolutely would have had marketing opportunities there, no doubt.
Stark Vegas would have been able to get some of that good cheese.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got more to come. Three and Out, take three around the corner. Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily and SI next hour as well here on Three and Out. talent, Ben. She's going to take over the roles. Most talented troop in the family.
Hey, I'm trying to get some money off like straight up. You know, I'm trying to benefit off of some of that.
Yeah, I mean, hey, join in. Everybody else is doing it as well. We'll get to Brooks Austin Dogs Daily on SI.com coming up next hour. Could Georgia's season potentially and how they play into the national picture hinge on one game? We'll talk about that coming up in hour number 2. BJ will also lead you up to Braves and Pirates, hopefully doing better than they did last night, I guess is the understatement of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ian Anderson has kind of emerged as, and Charlie Morton's obviously had stretches where he's been unhittable, and Max Fried has had a couple of top tier outings, but I think Ian Anderson has become kind of the most consistent arm in terms of who do you trust to go out there and get you 6, give you a chance to win, give you that quality start. Ian Anderson's ERA, Kevin, for the season, and keep in mind, this is with a relatively average outing a couple of starts ago, is at 3.35. I mean, that's really good. So I expect Ian Anderson to be effective tonight. I think he's the guy who you can trust in a moment to kind of bring you back from a bad performance, be that bounce back guy, that guy that maybe starts a streak. So I'm looking for big things against Ian Anderson, and I do not expect the Pirates, with their offensive struggles, I say this, to have back-to-back big nights. We'll see.
You don't expect the Pirates to come out there and have 11 runs. I mean, against the Braves, we'll see. Ian Anderson has been the one, the one starting pitcher that you can trust. You thought it would be Max Fried, but I mean, so far so good, Kevin. I think even though he gave you a sample size last year, was able to play in the NLCS, has kind of kept that momentum going. Kind of what we wanted from Max Fried. You get out of Ian Anderson. Hopefully, he can get the Braves back into the win column tonight and get some offense to help him out a little bit.
Yeah, we will see what the Braves can possibly throw back out there. Again, you lose 2 of 3, or heaven forbid, 3 of 3 to the Pirates, and we'll have afternoon baseball tomorrow. That's not good. And we'll get to, obviously, the trade deadline coming up on the flip side of the All-Star break, where the Braves need to be as far as that's concerned. We'll hit that and more coming up in Take 2. But Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily, and SI will join us next hour. Appreciate Nick Fitzgerald joining us, former Richmond Hill Wildcat, Mississippi Bulldog, NFL and XFL player as well. Talking name, image, likeness, his college career, more. If you missed any of that, you can go to ESPNcoastal.com, Spotify, Apple Podcast, our YouTube channel, and get the daily podcast version of the show. And here, Nick Fitzgerald joining us here on 3 and Out. This is 3 and Out on this Tuesday. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio, streaming live, ESPNcoastal.com. Also on Facebook and Twitter, and our YouTube page at ESPN Coastal there on YouTube. We take 3 next. Brooks Austin coming up in about 25 minutes here on 3 and Out. Great to be here. Hour number 2 of 3 and Out. We'll hear from Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI. Coming up this hour, we'll talk Georgia. Could their season hang on one game? We'll talk about that coming up in about 20 minutes here on 3 and Out. But as we do every day at this time, let's take 3 here on 3 and Out. All right, here we go. Take 1. If you had to power rank the Falcons, Braves, and Hawks a year ago, what would you have done, and what would that look like now as far as the state of Georgia and their pro sports teams?
Yeah, a year ago, probably would have gone Braves, Falcons, Hawks, especially with the Braves, success, making it close to the World Series. I think right now I would go Hawks, Braves, Falcons. You have some unknowns with the Falcons. I think the Braves are in the middle, somewhere, like you said, Kevin, around 500. And I think the Hawks not only just had the best season in franchise history, and I'm like you, Kevin, it's always, potentially a little inconsistent at best to assume you're going to be back where you were year after year. But you look at the roster and a lot of young talent. Trae Young is still just a couple of years into the league. You're thinking about Cam Reddish. You're thinking about Herter, getting DeAndre Hunter back. I mean, a lot of young talent. So I think the Hawks not only are atop the power rankings right now, but could be atop the power rankings for a few years to come. So right now I would go Hawks, Braves, Falcons.
Last year, Braves, Falcons, Hawks. Right now, I would go Braves, Hawks, Falcons. This is why. I see what the Hawks just did. I appreciate what the Hawks just did. But until this season is done, we are talking about the back-to-back National League East champions who just came within 4 hours of making it to the World Series. I'm sorry. I love Trick or Trey. I love Old Red Delphi. I love Lemon Pepper. I love, Gallinari. I love Bogdanovich. But the Braves, until what's the word? Currently constituted. They still got the rest of the season left. And this Braves, until proven otherwise, they are the champs of the NL East. So I'm not getting caught up in. I love the fact that the Hawks came 2 games away from making it to the finals. All I'm saying is all Ronald Acuna Jr. knows is winning the National League East. All he knows is their team is going to end up winning it because that's all they've been proven to do. So I'm not going to go with the reason, but I am awarding the fact that, the Hawks right now are, in front of the Falcons, but I wouldn't put them above the Braves. So I would go Braves, I would go Hawks, I would go Falcons.
I like the way Ben thinks and was able to negate the recency bias a little bit of the Atlanta Hawks. Again, I get it's easy to do, man, with the Hawks and their great run, but this was kind of a magical run late in the season, even with what Nate McMillan was able to do. So I like the way Ben thinks there. I still think the Braves have a little something. Don't give up on them yet. It's still, I think, largely where they're at, somewhat due to injuries on the roster, guys missing. We shall see. Speaking of the Braves, we go to take 2, BJ. Who should the Braves target for trade?
And I believe the trade deadline is at the end of the month. So you're talking about, a couple of more weeks to kind of get a feel for where you are. For me, I'm not so sure that right this second the Braves are a major buyer. And look, I think if you can get a potential relief pitcher for maybe a lower level prospect, maybe that's something you do. But I've seen a lot of speculation, and understandably, because the Braves, there's an unknown around the Braves about could you make a move for this high-profile starting pitcher or this high-profile outfielder or maybe even a third baseman and move Austin Riley or maybe even a catcher, Kevin, with some of the issues you've had at catcher. And I don't know that I would do that right now. If you see Atlanta get hot and maybe you're in a different position in a couple of weeks, perhaps. But this is something that you said, Kevin, a long time ago, and I think there's some value to it here. I remember you saying a long time ago, because people get really excited around the trade deadline, right? Like, oh, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And normally there aren't very many blockbuster moves. And I've heard you say before, unless this move is going to make you a World Series contender, and you said this in recent years with Braves, with the Braves around the trade deadline, is it really worth doing? And I don't know right now that there's a realistic name out there that you could trade where you go from where you are right now, which is, again, if we're being honest, a team that has not yet had a winning record this season, to all of a sudden you're a contender for the World Series? And I'm not saying you theoretically can't get to that point. Like we discussed earlier in the show, if the Braves go on and win 7 out of 8 here or whatever it is to close out the first half, maybe you're looking at this differently in a couple of weeks. But if I'm 5.5 or 6.5 games out of first place and I have a roster that's already limited by injuries, I don't know that or let me say this, I don't think I would be willing to mortgage one of my top tier prospects to get somebody to make a run. And if you're going to get, I mean, Kevin, you always joke about this too, right? People say, go out and get this left fielder. Who are you going to give up? I don't know. Just give them somebody from single A. Well, that's not the way it works. If you're going to get a big-time player, you're going to have to give up a big-time prospect or two. And right now, I don't think there's a player that, in my mind, you make this trade, and now I view the Braves on par with the Dodgers, with the Padres, with the Giants, with the Mets. Now, might I feel differently in a couple of weeks? Maybe. Maybe we get Huascar Ynoa back sooner rather than later, and maybe you feel like, hey, one starting pitcher that we add could make us the team that's viable with some of those top contenders. But right now, I don't think I'm willing to specifically target a top-tier player because I don't know that it's enough to change the expectations of my team, and I don't think the Braves are in a position right now to trade away an elite prospect given just how desperate you've been for starting pitchers in recent years.
I don't know if there's anybody you can trade for because I do agree with something Kevin said before the show. You're going to have to find a team that's not a contention, that's trying to get some of that money off their books to be able to help these Braves teams contend. BJ, maybe I've come to the realization that the Braves going to have to win in spite of their starting pitching. They might not win because of their starting pitching due to the fact that our best pitcher on the roster right now is Ian Anderson, not named not Max Fried, waiting on Mike Soroka to come back. Huascar Ynoa, you waiting on him to get back, Kevin. I'm going to ask you, could you add some firepower? We keep on acting as if Marcell Ozuna is not coming back. I don't see him being a Brave. There was a guy last year who I think the Braves traded for. I think God never passed his physical. Yasiel Puig, I don't even think he's in the majors right now. If I'm not mistaken, could you go out and try to add another bat? I know BJ is starting pitching. Could you potentially add another bat, move, and Kevin, you have potentially move Ronald Acuna Jr. to center? Have Yasiel in right field? I don't know. This is my ignorance talking, but would Yasiel Puig potentially be a guy you can go out there and try to get?
Well, I think you look at what the Braves are suffering from is the fact that your generational talent center fielder is not playing with the team right now because he couldn't hit. I say generational. A lot of people had that for Christian Pache, and he simply could not hit. And there's a reason we haven't seen him back with the team at all. Is because he is just not ready to hit major league pitching. I think Marcell Ozuna, obviously, he is not with the team. One, because he was injured, and two, because of off the field. And I don't think if you're the Braves, you think he's coming back because of all that's going on off the field, and you are suffering because of that, right? Because you miss him in the lineup. Even when he wasn't producing at as high a level, BJ, he was the protection behind Ronald Acuna and Freddie Freeman that said, look, you're going to have to pitch to somebody to give us something to hit. And then you could, slide everybody else accordingly down the lineup. And you really had a feared lineup. I think now, once you get past the first couple of guys, Austin Riley has been better. But who do you fear? Who are you afraid of in that lineup? Dansby Swanson has struck out the third most times in Major League Baseball, I believe, right now. Who are you afraid of outside of Ronald Acuna and Freddie Freeman and maybe Ozzie Albies? Okay, well, there's the first three batters. Unfortunately, you still have, 6 more. Who are you scared of?
Well, I think Austin Riley. Yeah, I think Austin Riley's cooled off a little bit, but I still think it comes down to starting pitching. And I know I've read a lot of blogs and whatnot of many pundits suggesting, well, could you trade for a potential starting pitcher that'd be a frontline guy? And I guess, Kevin, I'll defer to you here, but correct me if I'm wrong. Most of the time when you trade for a frontline starting pitcher, the team that's trading that pitcher away wants young pitching in return. And if I'm Atlanta, given how desperate you've been at times for starting pitching the last couple of years, I don't think I'm willing to part ways. I mean, I think Kyle Muller has shown he's here to stay. I think Huascar Ynoa, once he gets back, has a clear spot in the rotation. Yasiel De La Cruz, I don't think that there's any way you're moving him, potentially your top pitcher. I don't think Atlanta's in a position to send pitching away at the minor league level to get a veteran in return. Do you?
Yeah, to me, I have a hard time with a team that's, again, I think suffering largely due to injury. And again, Mike Soroka, maybe you look at it differently and say, maybe that dude never comes back because of the 2 Achilles injuries that he's had. And Marcell Ozuna, I think offensively you're suffering from that, but pitching, it has been a relative, merry-go-round there because of injuries and other things. And again, you went out and the last 2 years have gotten 2 pretty solid veterans. One pitched like 4 innings in all of 2020, and now you're dealing with Charlie Morton, who I think at times has looked brilliant and at times has looked like a late 30s kind of pitcher. So some of your moves you've made there in free agency haven't always panned out as far as the starting pitching is concerned. So, again, I would be hesitant to give up guys you feel are going to be major league ready in a year or so just to try to get it right now. Because, as you said, I think they're far enough away with the roster currently constructed, like one guy's not going to get it. Like, if you look at who you got and say, man, if we can go out and get one starting pitcher, I don't think that really gets you any farther than where you're at right now. Maybe a piece in the lineup could do that. That's going to cost you big time. And I always go back to the J.D. Drew, Adam Wainwright things. Like, yeah, J.D. Drew helped you win right then and continue that run of consecutive NL East titles, but you also lost a generational starting pitcher who's been one of the best in Adam Wainwright forever. And you kind of made that move so you could continue winning in the short term to get J.D. Drew in there. So I would kind of be wary of that. Depending on where you're at coming down the stretch. If this thing goes south in the next 2 or 3 weeks, yeah, I'm not giving up any of my top guys to try to continue it. I think a lot of it depends on how this Braves team plays. If you're end of July sitting at 1 game under 500 and you're still only 3.5 back, it at least give you something to consider. But like, hey, we're 3.5 back playing losing baseball right now. Is one guy going to get us there if we still are basically, as you said, just under a losing baseball team? Moving along, take 3, got to get to it. Today is National Fried Chicken Day. Christian says, describe the most perfect piece of food ever, as he is referring to fried chicken.
Absolutely. All right, well, it's got to be hot. I mean, it's got to be hot. You want to pick it up and go, ooh, it's got to be hot. It's got to be crunchy on the outside, and juicy on the inside. That's what I'm thinking. So hot, crunchy, crispy on the outside, and then juicy on the inside. But yeah, love the fried chicken. Yep.
Fried chicken is simple. The last bite got to feel like the first bite. If the last bite is soggy, that means that you didn't do it right. I need to hear the crunch. I need somebody at another table to look at me when I bit into the chicken. I want to make sure that you did this right. And look, this is the ultimate sign. Cold fried chicken, like if you put it in the refrigerator overnight and you don't have to warm it up because it's that good, I want your fried chicken to be that good. Let me tell you, to you real fried chicken makers out there, this is how you really do it. You go dry, you go wet, you go dry again, then you put it in that grease, and you let it do what it is. Now, if you're good enough, you can cook it in peanut oil. That's for you people that really know what they're doing. I have had chicken in peanut oil. Trust me, it is the best. But at the end of the day, Kevin, I'm telling you, fried chicken, the first bite got to feel like the last bite. And you should be able to make sandwiches with just the skin. Just take the skin off. You can make a sandwich with just the fried chicken skins. For you real fried chicken eaters out there, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I ain't talking to you. And like BJ say, it's got to be hot. I mean, yes, it has to be hot, but it has to be delicious also. Delicioso.
I'm saying he said
ridiculous.
describe the perfect piece of food, which obviously you all said is fried chicken. I agree. It's got to be hot. It's got to be juicy. It also had better been mooing at some point because it ain't a chicken.
What?
What are you talking about?
Say something ridiculous.
Like 3 inches thick filet mignon, sizzling, warm pink center, medium, not overcooked shoe leather.
I don't eat the shoe
that
leather
is
anymore.
that is the perfect food, and yeah, hey, you can if it's done well, you can eat it the next morning with eggs and have a tremendous breakfast. Things that say moo, not bok or whatever. Yeah. The perfect piece of food is steak, fried chicken. I mean, again,
A nice drum,
I said this in the
nice
show
drum
meeting.
leg.
Christian, I said this early before the show to Ben and BJ, and I feel like they think I said something blasphemous. I said fried chicken is the PB&J of like meats.
What?
You can't screw it up.
Oh, you can
Everybody,
screw it up, man. You can
everybody's
screw it
like,
up, man.
I don't know. Everybody's like, I love it. Anybody can kind of do it, and you can eat it.
There's a different no. Not everybody loves and appreciates
You
it.
can mess up a steak big time. I don't know if you can really screw up fried chicken.
Yeah,
It may
you
not
can
taste like you want it, but it's
absolutely screw up fried chicken. What are you
Can
talking
you-
about, Kevin?
Yes.
Can it not taste the way you want it and it's still okay, or is it like just completely botched? Like
It's
you
supposed to
have
be
throw it in
crunchy
the
and
trash?
juicy, not taste like a brick. Like you can't even bite into it because it's burnt on the inside.
Now, I want to be very clear
Talk
what we're
about it,
talking
Christian.
about here. We're not talking about chicken tenders.
No,
we're not talking
I
about
100%
nuggets.
understand what you're
We're
talking
talking about breasts or wings.
I
or
got it.
drumlets.
Yes, well, yes. And Southern, I don't know if you've ever been told this because I need you to know this right now. The next time you order fried chicken or you order anything that's a chicken and they say, do you like traditional or boneless? Look at them and tell them a boneless wing is a chicken strip. That is not chicken.
Hey, it is what it is, man. Look, steak, perfect food. Love it. Enjoy it. Live that lifestyle. We'll come back. Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily, and SI.com will join us. Could the dog season come down to one game? We'll talk to him next. 3 and out. It is 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben, glad you're with us on this Tuesday. Counting it down, we are inside a month to go till fall practices begin, and the Georgia Bulldogs, hot topic of the preseason conversation. Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI.com, joins us. Brooks, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, gentlemen. How are you guys?
We are doing fantastic. Before we get to the Dogs, we have a hard-hitting question that we must ask. We went around the show. Today is National Fried Chicken Day. Christian asked us to describe the perfect piece of food because he is all in on the fried chicken. I said, no, it's a steak. So now we've gone around the office. You might be the tiebreaker. Perfect piece of fried chicken, or you going, Christian said the liar has to be like a ribeye steak, a perfectly cooked ribeye. You can have either one. Which one are you taking?
So I guess my question is, and I know I'm going outside the boundaries, does the perfect piece of fried chicken extend to chicken wings? Because I will definitely take a plate of hot chicken wings over a ribeye steak. That's just me personally, though. But if we're going just the basics of fried chicken versus steak, I think you got to go with a nice medium rare ribeye.
Hey, there we go. Brooks.
All right, Brooks Austin joining us here. Brooks, we'll talk to you soon, man.
Yeah, he's all in on the. He hurt my feelings. He's like, I'm really not big on steak. I'm like, what is wrong with you? So that's I'm glad you came on our side. But for the purpose of the discussion, Brooks, we were talking about like the traditional, fried chicken like you would get in a bucket. So you are the steak guy. That's what we like to hear. But George obviously counted it down. I know you've been doing some scouting on the guys that are getting ready to play, man. And where do you see this Georgia team in terms of talent compared to some of Kirby Smart's other team? Not what their record's going to be, but just straight talent. How does this one stack up to some of the other Kirby Smart teams he's had?
I mean, I think it's on par, if not better, than any other team he's had, particularly because of what he has at the quarterback position, and pair that with the offensive coordinator and just the staff in general. I'm a big believer in the talent in the staff is indicative of the ultimate success of a football team, and how you go about it. That 2019 football team was pretty stacked talent-wise, but offensive coordinator and the full round table of that coaching staff wasn't near as talented, in my opinion, as what they've stacked up when you look in terms of Todd Monken and Will Muschamp. But in terms of football players on the roster, I think it's as good, if not better, than any roster top to bottom that Kirby Smart's had in his tenure since 2016 at Georgia, for sure.
Well, I guess the follow-up to that I want to ask is how close in your mind is this roster to Alabama's roster and Clemson's roster, maybe Ohio State if you want to throw them in there as well, the programs that have kind of defined the last couple of years in college football?
Yeah, Alabama is always due. It seems like they're always due for a down year, but when you lose 17 guys to the NFL draft, I know they've recruited as well, if not better than anybody else in the college football landscape. I get that they're Alabama. I get that they rebuild seemingly every year, but it hasn't been like this. Not in my recent memory. Starting quarterback, 2 starting wide receivers, starting left tackle, senior linebacker gone, 2 starting corners gone. They have a rebuild on their hands that they haven't really seen probably since like the 2012 roster up and left. And I believe if you look back, that 2013 roster was probably one of their least talented rosters that they had. Look, they're extremely talented. They're Alabama, but they've got a lot of answers or a lot of holes to fill and a lot of answers to get solved before they're ready to go at the rate at which they have been in recent memory. Clemson's as stacked as they've ever been, especially defensively. I think front seven wise, Clemson's got the best front seven in college football. And honestly, I don't think there's really a debate for it. A lot of Georgia fans will hear me say that and go, oh, well, what about us? And I'm just here to tell you that Clemson's is better. In my opinion, they're better. And I think the NFL draft in the coming years will prove that as well. As far as Ohio State goes, they've got a quarterback discussion that they've got to figure out before we throw them into this discussion of, they're a top 3 football team. Roster-wise, 100%, but when you've got a quarterback discussion and one that you don't have a finalized answer at going into a football season like this, I have my doubts in terms of saying you're one of those top 1 or 2 football teams roster-wise in the country. So I think Georgia fits the bill across the board with any of these football teams in the college football landscape.
And Brooks, from the teams that match up talent-wise with Georgia to the teams that, essentially trying to be able to keep up with Georgia. Heather Dinich came out and said that, when you look at the rest of the SEC East this year, Florida, no Kyle Trask, no Kyle Pitts. If obviously Georgia gets Clemson the first game of the year, if they don't win against Clemson, they're not going to get much help in the SEC East. That's very, very lonely at the top when you look at Georgia. But hasn't it kind of been like that for the last 3 or 4 years? Like Georgia is the beast of the East with Florida trying to catch up to them, and really the rest of the SEC East, trying not to get like lapped when they play the Georgia Bulldogs.
I mean, you guys at 3-0 don't prepare me for much, but you prepared me for this argument, and I just think it's funny that Georgia gets these schedule discussions, or at least from Heather Dinich they do, but I don't hear much people talking about Clemson's schedule, and I looked it up. They got Georgia, yeah, but then they play South Carolina State, not South Carolina State, Georgia Tech, NC State, Boston College, Syracuse, Pittsburgh, Florida State, Louisville, UConn, not UConn basketball, UConn football, Wake Forest, and then they finish the season with South Carolina. Why does Georgia suddenly get this question about their schedule because the SEC East is down? Georgia runs the gauntlet, right? They run the schedule, right? They lose to Clemson. They went out in the SEC East. Guess what? They've still got to beat Alabama in the SEC title game, and that'll probably be a top 5 matchup. And then you've got 2 of those on your schedule. So, yeah, Georgia loses to Clemson. It puts them in a win out mode, but that's no different than any other year in the SEC East or any other year for anybody in college football. Whereas on the other side, if Clemson loses that Georgia game, I mean, I don't know how you put them. I don't care if they beat everybody's brains in the ACC. They played one quality opponent all year in this hypothetical situation, and they lose. Clemson is the football program that they should be throwing these allegations and accusations towards, not Georgia. Georgia's got an SEC schedule, yes. It's the SEC East this year, and it is down. But I'm here to tell you, Florida's going to be preseason ranked a top 15 program. Kentucky's going to be a top 25 program. South Carolina's going to be a decent football team this year. They're not going to be great. Tennessee's going to score points, but they're not going to be very good. But you're still going to have to play an SEC schedule with SEC caliber football players across the field from you. And you've got an SEC championship game lined up if you run the table. So, yeah, is the Clemson game a must win? Yeah, for national title expectations, you would probably want to win that football game, but you don't have to win that football game if you're Georgia because, again, you're going to see Alabama come December 7th or whenever that SEC title game is, presumably. So, no, it's not a must-win game. It's not a you're eliminated from the playoff game. I think that's just what we live in nowadays, guys, where it's hot take culture. I think Heather Dinich did a great job in making sure people like us are talking about Heather Dinich today.
Very true. But again, Brooks, I would kind of punch back and say I think people are questioning Clemson and say if they lose that Georgia game, who is, unless there's a team in the ACC that is better than we are expecting preseason, I know that's always a possibility. I think people have questioned and are questioning Clemson as to whether or not the rest of their schedule would hold up if you're trying to compare resumes at the end of the season.
I mean, didn't they lose to Syracuse a couple years ago and get into a college football playoff despite how bad the ACC is? I mean, there's history of precedence for Clemson getting in with a one loss. And I think that, especially if they win there, it seems to me that if you go 12-1 and win the ACC, it's almost an automatic bid at this point for Clemson. But that would mean, like, if they lose that game, Alabama and Georgia are going to have to lose another one for them to get in. I'm in agreement there with you. Whereas the other side of the board is if Georgia wins out after potentially losing to Clemson, they're fine. I mean, you can count those chickens before they hatch. I mean, that's done. If they win the SEC championship game with one loss to Clemson, Georgia is getting in to the college football playoff. You cannot say the same about a school like Clemson this year.
You mentioned Florida will be preseason top 15. I've gone on record. I think the Gators are going to be better than people think, Brooks. In some ways, obviously, if Georgia beats them, assuming Georgia beats Florida in Jacksonville, does it help Georgia if the Gators are actually really good and are near the top 10 in the top 10?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it helps college football for Florida to be good. I think that's the case there. I mean, I know I covered Georgia and everybody, and that's understood, but it's definitely beneficial for not only the SEC East, but college football as a whole, for Dan Mullen to right the ship and bounce back this year after an 8-4 season last year where, I mean, Ben, you're a Florida alumnus. That is the best roster Florida has had, at least the best offense Florida has had since the Urban Meyer days, and it amounted to an 8-4 football season. So, yeah, Dan Mullen's got to step up this year, even despite that contract extension. He's got to prove that he is indeed this quarterback whisperer that everybody claims he is. He's got to go out and prove that Emory Jones is worthy of all that hype and anticipation that he's getting this offseason. and that he, for that matter, had coming out of high school. He was an extremely highly touted prospect coming out of high school. So they have got to live up to at least the 8-4 record they had last year, in my opinion. I think they got to go out and have a very good season. You can't have a 3 or 4 loss SEC slate this year if you're Florida. I would imagine you have to be in that top 10, top 12 discussion leading up into that Georgia game for Florida if you're a Gators fan. That would be my expectation. And I think they've got a relatively decent roster. I know they've lost a lot offensively, but I'm expecting that defensive backfield to be a little bit better. I know that sounds weird with losing a guy like Marco Wilson, but I think Kaiir Elam he is what J.C. Horn was last year, in my opinion. I got a chance to see Kaiir up close at the Elite 11 this year. That dude's bona fide. I mean, he's going to be a first-round draft pick this year out of Florida, and you've got to round out the rest of that defense, and they've got a good front four. So for the first time in a long time, I think Florida might be a defensive-heavy football team, something that I don't think you could have said about that, about them in a long, long time.
And Brooks, obviously, I'm always hoping that my Florida Gators go out there and make a game of it in Jacksonville. But something that's the narrative with Georgia is this: if Georgia loses to Clemson, they still control their own destiny because they're gonna run through, the SEC. That will be something that has never happened under Kirby Smart, even with that 2018 team, that had Jake Fromm, that had Nick Chubb, that had Sony Michel in that defense. Do you think that even if Georgia loses to Clemson, you think they're gonna go undefeated in the SEC this year to go into the SEC championship game with no loss against Alabama?
I think if there's one criticism, Ben, about Kirby Smart that's warranted, in my opinion, it is 2017 Auburn when they didn't really show up in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Now, they came back and beat the brake drums off of in the SEC championship game, but that just kind of proves my point. It is 2018 on the road at LSU when you lose, I think, 35-10 or something like that, and you just don't really show up. It is 2019 against South Carolina when you lose an inexcusable loss there at home. It is those football games. And for that matter, it is 2020 Florida, where I know there was some extenuating circumstances, but after the first quarter, they kind of went flat, and defensively, they dang sure went flat in that second half of that football game, or second quarter on in that football game. So, yeah, you've got to avoid those. I mean, period, point blank. Even if you beat Clemson, if you're Georgia, you've got to avoid 2019 South Carolina. You've got to avoid 2018 LSU. And again, if there is a warranted criticism of Kirby Smart, it's that. I mean, it is 100% that, where you just got inexcusable losses out of nowhere all over the board in these past years for the University of Georgia.
Kind of follow up on that, Brooks. What game on the schedule worries you the most of that happening? Or you look at it and say that might be the one where it's just you think you got it in the bag and you just come out with a flat performance.
Yeah, I think if any team might give them a run for their money in the SEC East this year that's quote-unquote unexpected, for me it's Missouri, because if you're going to beat Georgia this year, if you're going to quote-unquote sneak up on them, you're going to have to score with them because they're going to put up some points this year. And if there's any offense in the SEC East this year that I comfortably go into it and like, yeah, I like what the OC and the head coach do offensively. I like what they got at quarterback in Blazelack. To me, it's got to be Missouri. That's the one for me that I look at it and I'm like, hey, the Tigers might sneak up on you if you're not awake for that football game and ready to play against an offense that I think is going to put up points this year.
Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI.com. Our guest here on 3 and Out. Brooks, always a pleasure. We'll talk soon.
Fried chicken, overrated.
There we go. Brooks Austin is welcome anytime with that take alone.
Don't you dare say that.
Yes, Brooks is welcome anytime as a state guy officially here on the show. Brooks, appreciate it. We'll talk soon. It's 3 and Out. We're coming right back all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Great to be here with you on this Tuesday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. Good chatting with Brooks Austin, steak guy, like that. NCAA football, obviously a big thing for gamers out there. I saw a college athlete saying, "Look, hey, they're starting their own gaming channel." EA Sports said, "Hey, they're coming back with NCAA football." It's a big thing.
I'll just have to step in here, correct you,
Sorry.
Kevin. NCAA has nothing to do with this. It's just EA Sports. College
Sorry.
football. So it's a very key point, though.
I thought they had NCAA
They
licensing before.
they used to. Now they're going to each school individually and having them sign up. So,
Okay, well,
so
there you
just
go.
a key point.
So the game's coming back.
EA
regardless at
Sports
some point.
college football.
EA Sports college football is coming back at some point. Thank you for that clarification. Very important. And if it was coming back this year, and it's not, but if it's coming back this year, who would be the highest rated players out there? And I have like a little different question when we get done with that about how like a certain team would stack up. But who would be the highest rated player in the game if it came out right now?
I mean, if you went off, I guess the assumption maybe there's 4 or 5 guys that are 99s or 98s. I was thinking probably in some order, probably Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell, Kayvon Thibodeau, Evan Neal, and probably Derek Stingley would be my 5. Does that sound about right to y'all?
Sam Howell's not a 98, 99. No, he's not there.
Sam Howell's nice. I mean,
I think he is. I think he absolutely is. Yeah.
I mean, for me, obviously, Spencer Rattler is going to be the headliner. Derek Stingley Jr. Kayvon Thibodeau might be the number 1 overall pick. I really, really like the kid, Nick Benito out of Oklahoma. I mean, the kid don't have a lot of flaws. And, Evan Neal, offensive tackle from Alabama. Bryce Young, he ain't going to have to worry about getting touched. But, yeah, I'm just saying with the hype, because a lot of stuff has to do with hype and different things. I mean, Sam Howell might not be a 99, but, dude, he ain't far. I mean, the dude is like, box office when you look at what he's done at UNC, and if anybody going to dethrone these Clemson Tigers this year, I think Sam Howell and UNC Tar Heels going to have something to do with it. I mean, I had DeMarvin Leal, kind of like a 3-4 defensive end out of A&M. I mean, he's picked to do a lot of big things. Bijan Robinson, the running back out of Texas. I mean, he's going to get a start to kind of help him go out there and kind of spread those Big 12 defenses out. But yeah, I mean, Kevin, I had a chance to meet Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, even though I was, it was at Florida State. I remember him 3 years ago, and I'm like, how good is this kid going to be, BJ? I mean, the quarterback's going to always get the pick with Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell, Derek King. They're going to get, but Kayvon Thibodeau, I mean, not only, is he one of the best returning defensive players, might be the best returning defensive player not named Derek Stingley Jr. He's also the starting punt returner for Oregon this year. I mean, how much do we miss out on not being able to watch him play because obviously he's in the Pac-12?
Oh, man, he's a superstar. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think he's a lock 99. I think, Kevin wants to go back and forth on Howell. Okay, maybe. I think in terms of, Neal, lock 99, Thibodeau, lock, Rattler, lock, Stingley, lock. I think you can make an argument for Justin Ross, coming back after what he did. I think maybe you look at a Chris Olave at Ohio State, probably. Kyle Hamilton, the safety at Notre Dame, is really, really good. He might be in that 98, 99 kind of window. But I'm going to ride for Howell. I think Howell deserves it. 74 touchdowns the last 2 years, has set records both seasons. In terms of underclassmen production is pretty unparalleled historically with what he's done. Had North Carolina, not by himself, very good team last year, but in the Orange Bowl a year ago. I think Sam Howell would be right there.
All right, now a bigger question. Given that Alabama, BJ, has signed allegedly the best recruiting classes per numbers and rankings ever, who is the lowest rated guy on their 2 deep? Like what number would you say the lowest rated guy on their 2 deep would be?
The backup kicker.
I mean, probably
the 2 deep, who's the lowest rated guy?
I mean,
it'd probably be like an 82 or an 83. I mean,
is that allowed? 82 or 83? Wow, I didn't even think about it. So they're 2 deep. Their second team is starting on every other team in the SEC, probably not named Georgia. I think at LSU they starting. I think at Texas A&M they starting. But give Alabama this credit. With teams having 5 stars like the Georgias of the world, like the Oklahomas, like the the Ohio States of the world, the Clemsons, those guys stay around. I mean, that wide receiver room had what? Ruggs, Judy, Devonta Smith, Waddle, and all those guys stayed. I mean, they had Jalen, they had Tua, they had Mac Jones. I mean, Najee Harris was a backup for like what, 2 years, right? Behind Damian Harris. So I don't, the chance to star at Alabama is enough to get you to stay there. But yeah, if your worst player is at an 81 when other players trying to get their rankings up to in the 80s, yeah, they got some really, really good problems going on in Tuscaloosa these days.
Yeah, but I think with Georgia's roster too, when you talk about Georgia's roster on a video game, I mean, there'd be a lot of 90s, a lot of 80s on that roster. I mean, there wouldn't be a weakness. I mean, when you look at the depth chart, I mean, I think, remember when you used to play the game before Ben got it changed?
Wow,
and, every team
put out a word to EA Sports is about to come back. They didn't give me a definitive date, but like I said, I don't know how many people work in the office right now, but I'm buying 2 games, one for Kevin and one for Southern. Now, the rest of y'all can get your own game.
That sounds about right. But what I'm saying is, remember how Alabama would be like an A+. I think Georgia would be an A+, and I think Clemson would be an A+. Maybe Ohio State, but I think those teams would all be kind of like Kevin said. You're looking at the player ratings, and everybody's in the 90s, maybe the 80s.
You still got to be ready to take UTEP to the national championship when you play that game at the end of the day. We've got more to come. It's 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you along here on 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. Coming up in the final hour, we'll look at the Hawks re-signing or getting Nate McMillan, the permanent gig for 4 years. Also look at college football. What are some maybe fatal flaws out there for college football teams? And the Braves and Pirates coming up tonight. Game 2. Braves today recalled right-handed pitcher Jacob Webb to Atlanta and placed Pablo Sandoval, Kung Fu Panda, on the restricted list. So you say, what does that mean? Restricted list. You can place on restricted list if the player has left the team without a valid reason. I don't think that's that. Or has announced his intention to retire, but is still of an age or level of skill that could allow him to return to professional baseball in the future. I.e., hey, guys, I think I'm done. You cut him, then he signs with another team. So they've put him on a restricted list. I mean, this is a dude that basically just bats. BJ, for all intents and purposes, he's a DH minus 2 or 3 extra at bats a night. I don't know that he's actually played a game in the field this season for the Braves. I'm trying to think real hard if that's the case, but the Braves putting him on the restricted list. Be interested to see what they do to replace him on the roster. And I think obviously he got off to a hot start, but has since been in a incredible slump. And again, if your only job is to come up once a day and swing the bat, you unfortunately, while not getting a lot of reps, had better be pretty darn good at it.
Yeah, I was going to say, in your mind, where does this leave the Braves with their bench? And is this something where, I know we've talked about, what are you going to add to the team? Could the Braves be in the market for, I guess, a kind of versatile option to bring some power off the bench potentially?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And again, I'm interested to see kind of more about this. Braves just putting that out less than 5 minutes ago. So I'm interested to see why they put him on the restricted list. Is there something going on? I think you can also put on the restricted list if there's like something going on with your family, or like I said, you just left the team for whatever reason. If there's something going on, why he's on that restricted list. We'll see if the Braves have any comment on that, but that's certainly an interesting one. But yeah, they can replace him on the roster. It'll be interesting to see who they replace him with. Obviously, Arcia, I think, has come up. Orlando Arcia playing outfield. Again, he's kind of slow with the bat right now, but it's been 2 games. I think you kind of want to see him get to play more and kind of what he brings you. But yeah, Pablo Sandoval, I think, was good for morale with the panda hugs and all that. But again, he was 1 at bat a day, and that was about all you were going to do with Pablo Sandoval. So I think the Braves are probably looking for somebody with a little more versatility right now, considering you don't have the DH, which many people think is going to come after the next collective bargaining agreement. We'll talk about that more. Hopefully we'll know more as we go a little bit closer to game time from the Braves as well. We'll talk about that in the final hour of the program. It is 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We are streaming live at ESPNCoastal.com. Final hour of 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Kevin, BJ, and Ben will look at the job Nate McMillan did, and obviously the Hawks rewarding him with that contract extension. Also, what are some fatal flaws of college football's top contenders that might stumble them up, trip them up on their way to getting to that college football playoff as we lead you up towards Braves and Pirates as well. But certainly I want everybody to be on the lookout tomorrow. Obviously, if you're following Hurricane Elsa, I think we are expecting.
Let it rain.
Let it. What should you say? Let it go, right? Is that what it is?
Anyway, go. She did.
Number one, you can tell that Christian don't
Let
have
it go and let it snow. Let it go.
No, let's let it go.
Okay. Anyways, Hurricane Elsa. We are expected here along the coast of Georgia to get kind of the majority of what we're going to see Wednesday late morning, afternoon into like Thursday morning. I think 2 a.m. it starts moving majority of it off into South Carolina. So be careful out there. Certainly heading into tomorrow afternoon. But Christian just enlightened me. Well, he didn't really enlighten me. He kind of teased me with it.
I did.
And was like, because we were talking about, hey, when are we expected to get a lot of the effects of then tropical storm is when it's what's supposed to be when it hits us tomorrow. He's like, well, it's like 50% chance at like 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and it just keeps going up from there. And tomorrow he goes, did you know that 50% chance of rain doesn't mean maybe it'll rain, maybe it doesn't? I was like, excuse me? So apparently, did you know this?
But it still does mean that, but not the way you think it means that.
Did you know this, BJ? Like if it says 50% chance of rain.
I don't exactly know what you're saying to me.
All right, so Kevin or BJ, when you hear or you see on the app, there's a 50% chance of rain. What does that mean to you?
I think it means that there is a better than or an average chance or a average to moderate chance there will be rain at some point, I guess.
Right. And that's not wrong, but it's not right in the way you think it is. Okay. So here's what it actually means. I saw a meteorologist make a post about this. He goes, you guys have been thinking about this wrong the entire time. When a meteorologist says let's just go with Chatham County. It says there's a 50% chance of rain in Chatham. That doesn't mean it might or it might not. That means 50% of Chatham County will see rain, and the other 50% won't. So it's not a mathematical possibility. It's an area coverage thing. So if it's 100% chance in Chatham County, that means everywhere you are inside of Chatham County is going to get rain. If it's 90% chance, that means there's that 10% area that's not going to get rain. Is this messing with your mind? Is this like real?
Yeah, thinking like it was a 50%. So 50% means an area, not
it's not probability, but it still is.
Half of the area is going to get it.
But it still is probability. Yeah.
Okay.
So when you see 40 to 50% tomorrow, that means 40 to 50% of the area in which your phone is telling you you're in is going to get rain. It's going to rain. It just in what area?
So if you see 97%, you're just like, let me hope I'm in that 3%.
That 3%. You just want to be in that 3% unless your yard needs it. Unless your yard needs it, and then you're praying to be in that 97%.
Did you know this, BJ? This is new information to me. 50%.
No, I didn't. I mean, to be honest with you, I've never really kind of thought about it, but no, I mean, that makes sense.
You accepted, right? You just kind of accepted, like a 50% chance. Well, maybe it will, maybe it won't. That's what it means.
When you see 90, I'm like, okay, so that means.
But what it could mean is if it says 50-50 and you're driving, you could be in the area where it's 50% not raining and then drive into the other 50%.
That will make it 100% in my mind. No, I was like, look, I would look. I'm like you, like. So now it's like 50% chance of rain just means that it could rain in half the area, just not at my house. Is that what you're saying? 90% chance it could rain everywhere else but my house.
Yeah, you would be in the 10%. You would be in the 10% where it's not raining.
Okay. I guess we'll be safe out there regardless when it's all said and done.
What we're here to do is inform you.
I think that's what we're doing right now. We are letting the people know our vast meteorological knowledge.
You're welcome.
You're educating.
I've always just kind of looked at the map where like the green and yellow is. That's kind of how I
love that map. Love a map. Do you get excited when your area turns pink? I kind of do, because that's the heavy stuff.
That's when it finna get ugly. You start looking at the roof, say, "Uh-oh."
Well, apparently we are going to get tropical storm portion of it. I think.
When do you start getting ready to leave?
When do I start getting ready to leave?
When it's knocking on the door.
What?
No. What piece of information has to come across your news feed for you to be ready to leave?
If I'm being honest, I mean,
because you lived in Florida for a while, so you might be used to it.
I would say I know it's crazy. I look at my back like when my backyard is a small pond when I can't see it anymore. I'll be like, oh, and I start doing this. I start saying to myself, okay, what in my house can I afford to just let it get tore up? So a lot of the stuff, I put stuff up high that I want. The TV's done. I'm sorry. I don't got nowhere to put it up. And I got to say to myself, hey, okay, I got to, because I could wait on our boss to like send us a PSA, but yeah. I try to get out there before he gives us, the alarm.
Lieutenant Dan and Forrest Gump.
Oh, so you're
hanging on.
You're looking at it. See, I can't go with BJ. I don't know about you. I can't go without power that long. So like if it looks like power is going to be out for any significant amount of time, if I can leave, I'm leaving.
Oh, so that's it. I mean, and you got to deal with some of these.
You are not a man of nature, is what you're saying.
There's no power. It's 85 degrees outside, so it's just hot and it's raining. So what are you doing?
Hanging out.
Define hanging out.
I don't think it's going to be that bad. I mean, like I said, we're supposed to get most of what we're getting tomorrow between kind of lunchtime through 2 a.m. as it moves through Georgia.
And if it says 70%, try to find that 30%.
If it says 70%, you go find the 30% where it's dry and you just hang out there.
That's right.
And you're good. But moving along from weather to certainty.
Oh,
you have Nate McMillan is back for a 4-year stint now with the Atlanta Hawks. We talked about this. Hey, that was the priority of the offseason, BJ and Ben. Had to get that done. They did it. And now you can move forward. Because, again, I think you look at the job that Nate McMillan did. I mean, this was a losing team. And it was the same players that couldn't win under Lloyd Pierce were the same players that got within a couple of wins of going to the NBA Finals. So, obviously, what's the X factor there? The only outlier, it's the coaching. And he was able to get these guys to buy in a system. He got Trae Young to maximize defensive effort. He got Trae Young to realize he can be a scorer and a distributor at the same time. He got role players to step up and know their roles. He got them to work. I think he did a fantastic job of turning a team that was going nowhere fast into a contender, so much so that now people think you roll the balls out there next year, and this is a Hawks team that could go to the finals next year. That's how good of a job he did.
And I agree with what you guys said yesterday about this being, priority number one, signing Coach McMillan, kind of ensuring a continuation of the future that you've seen. But it really is remarkable. And sometimes I think we were so caught up in kind of the fun and the excitement of it all that we don't even fully appreciate what happened. And when Coach McMillan took over, Atlanta went 27-11. I mean, think about that. 27-11 with a very young team. And then you make the playoffs. You win a series where New York has home court. You win a series where Philadelphia has home court. You play the Bucks, at least for a couple of games, very, very close, and win that game 1 up in Milwaukee. It was a complete game changer in terms of the direction of your franchise, the perception of your franchise. And it just seemed like this was a team that was in rhythm, right? And I don't just say that about Trae Young. I don't just say that about the offense, but defensively as well. I know Cody used to send me messages on the chat all the time about the defensive turnaround and the proficiency metrics and the advanced stats. And it really was like a new team defensively in terms of the perimeter defense and the better job they did at defending the 3, in terms of altering shots in the paint with Clint Capella and John Collins. And I know there were some games in the playoffs where he wasn't at his best, but I think Coach McMillan helped get the best out of Clint Capella, led the regular season in rebounding in the NBA. He really gave you an inside presence you haven't had in quite some time. And then, Ben, you said something when the Hawks were really hot in the regular season and in the playoffs. Pay attention to how the role players play. Are they buying in? Are guys settling into their role and excelling in their role? That can be sometimes a sign of kind of the overall team atmosphere and a reflection of the coach. And, you saw guys like Danilo Gallinari. I'm coming off the bench. Okay, that's fine. I'll do that and score 20. Solomon Hill, I'm coming off and I'm like I'm coming on and I'm the defensive guy. Okay, Kevin Huerter, one night you may get 20 minutes, one night you may get 10. Are you able to function like Lou Williams when you come in? Can you give, 8-10 points in a short amount of time? You saw guys do that. You saw the roster really transition when DeAndre Hunter got hurt and find a way to keep the rotation effective. So Coach McMillan did an extraordinary job. This was a team that during the regular season and the playoffs embraced the pressure. And that's what I loved. Being on the road in New York, in Philly, we're calm, we're confident. And to me, that's a reflection of the confidence this team had, kind of stemming from Nate McMillan and his experiences. So I think it's a big time win. You had to do it. And I'm excited about the future of Hawks basketball.
Yeah, I was very impressed with Nate McMillan because it's hard to go from interim head coach in the National Basketball Association, NBA, to become the head coach. And the thing about Nate McMillan, he knows the players. I said this yesterday. I'm not saying that they're best friends. I'm not saying that him and Trae Young got a special bond. They have a bond that's based in that's rooted in respect. That's rooted in the understanding that this is how good of a team we can be. Because it's not like, okay, Atlanta lost the last 2 games without Giannis on the floor, and they had Trae the last game. But it's not like the East is down because LeBron is in the West now. I think that Philly had the best record in the NBA this year. The Knicks were a surging team. Tom Thibodeau going out there winning Coach of the Year. Everybody expected Milwaukee to be playing the Nets, in the Eastern Conference Finals to make it to the finals. What I saw is a team that's led by Trae Young, that is an unselfish superstar, that his teammates defer to him. They like the fact that he's going to get the interviews, the ink in the paper, that if they sink or swim, it's going to be because of Trae. But then you start talking about a guy like Lou Williams, which can bring a veteran presence to a team that has a lot of young guys that don't understand how to win yet. A guy in Cam Reddish who hadn't played since February, who went when asked upon to give you some quality minutes, was able to do that. So I think that now that Nate McMillan is the head coach, now you start really implementing what you want to do from day one, because he took over for Lloyd Pierce. So he had to kind of be a little bit of Lloyd and a little bit of Nate, because that's what they was. Now he can be all of Nate McMillan, and it's always harder from the start of the season. Like what we're saying with the Braves now, Kevin, a sample size season, anybody can look good. Can you do it for the whole year? So because this, and the thing that Nate McMillan did that nobody's talking about, he created something in Atlanta that wasn't there, and that is expectation. Nobody expected anything from this Atlanta Hawks team. Nothing. If Philly was the process, I don't even know what you would call Atlanta, but they beat Philly. They beat the Knicks. And, they came up 2 games short against Milwaukee. So for me, I think it's going to be Nate McMillan really showing this team that, look, don't be satisfied with what you did in 2021. Go out there and prove you're not a one-hit wonder. Go out there and prove you can be one of the best teams in the East. And go out there and prove that you're going to be a team to reckon with moving forward, because with Trae, you're going to have veterans that want to come play with him. And dare I say, John Collins, I don't know if he's earned a max deal, Kevin and BJ, but he's definitely earned a nice extension.
Look, man, I think the Hawks set up themselves for the future, and you have, as you said, been a nice young base to move this thing forward. BJ, do you think this is, and we see this in sports, do you think this is a flash in the pan, or do you think this is a team that has some real staying power?
I think there's staying power. Now, I want to be clear. I don't think that means you're going to be in the Eastern Conference Finals. Just chalk it up every year. I've seen a lot of fans say, oh, man, Trae's 23 and the team is, it's hard to win. Ben, you talk about that all the time. It's really hard to maintain the status quo. But do I think that Atlanta should feel like a team that expects to make the playoffs and win next season? Absolutely. Do I feel like this is a team that if they're in the Eastern Conference Finals a year from now, we're looking around talking about how surprised we are? No. I think this is a team that now is a part of that group of teams that feels like they can contend and potentially contend for the long haul.
I think they do have staying power because Trae Young is the guy that understands how to embrace the role as being that superstar. Nate McMillan understands how to develop young talent. You got a bunch of guys, Kevin, that's still first-round draft picks. I think the whole starting 5 at one point was first-round draft picks in their early 20s. And I don't know what type of veteran they're gonna add in the offseason as far as like wanting to come to Atlanta. But Atlanta has become a destination spot when it used to be a spot that could pay you good money, but you knew you weren't gonna win. I'm intrigued to see what the front office is gonna do for like who you add with Trae, but you get Trae with all these young guys around him. John Collins getting back to learning how to play with his back to the basket. I think you got a very, very dangerous team, because if they ask Milwaukee, well, how did y'all finally make it to the finals? Y'all had to beat the Knicks? No. Y'all had to beat Philly? No. Y'all had to beat Brooklyn? No, we had to beat Atlanta. And y'all swept them? No, we didn't. I mean, they took us to 6. So that's got to make you feel good because they got a back-to-back regular season MVP in Giannis. And I know he didn't play the last 2 games. You got to feel good if you're Atlanta. You are a player, maybe a post player away from really getting to what you want to do, because if you can get a dominant post player that wants to body guys up like Brook Lopez did in Game 5, I think Atlanta got something special going on.
Again, we will see how this Hawks team moves forward, and if it is a team that has some staying power, where some of the other ones before your Al Horford teams and others kind of got there, then the team fizzled apart, and it took them to now to get back to an Eastern Conference Finals. We've got more to come here on 3 and Out. We'll talk a little college football. Who are some teams that are contenders, but maybe have one little fatal flaw that could trip them up on their way to a playoff appearance or a title appearance? We'll get to that next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. I got to talking and I forgot. And you got the weather for after the next break. Hey, you have a truck over this one? Oh, see you guys, bro. See you. Good to have you here, 3 and Out, all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network, leading you up towards Braves and Pirates game 2 of this 3-game series. But we look college football here. Obviously, we know who some of the early preseason contenders are, but what are the weaknesses, those flaws that you see in those teams that could sink the season in terms of playing for the college football playoff and ultimately the title? Let's start with Georgia. I know, Christian, you had some thoughts there on second down. You feel like, it could be the offensive line that people are talking about JT Daniels and this and that, but it could actually be the offensive line. If they have a couple of subpar performances, might be the undoing for the University of Georgia.
I said this, and I'll let you guys react to it. I feel like Georgia could win the SEC East. They have good offensive line play with any of the quarterbacks on their roster under center. Stetson Bennett, Brock Vandegrift, Carson Beck. You have any of those guys outside of JT Daniels starting behind a good offensive line with as good as their defense is, I think they could win the SEC East. I don't think the reverse is true. I don't think you're in Atlanta at the end of the year if your offensive line isn't good, even if JT Daniels is under center. So I think Georgia's season hinges on what Matt Luke can do with that offensive line.
I mean, for me, the thing about Georgia is I think it's obviously when you start thinking about the expectation that Georgia has to deal with every year, Kevin, BJ, and Christian, it goes up a notch, because if you don't think that these young men understand like the pressures that they under, I'm not saying that the pressure is gonna get to them. I'm just thinking that JT Daniels is a young man that did not grow up wanting to be a Georgia Bulldog, but now he's thrust into this big time situation. And kind of similar to what Lane Kiffin said when he was the head coach of Tennessee, goes, dude, football never stops there. Never. It only gets ramped up. I mean, we have to go through like a month and a half of, what the hell are we going to do without it? And then it comes right back. I think it's just the gauntlet of the SEC. Like, I do agree, Christian, what you said about the offensive line. But for me it's week in and week out. Do you play elite against a team that can't meet the talent threshold? Can you make Jacksonville not really be a 4-quarter game? And can you not lose to a team that doesn't meet the talent threshold of them? So I think it's just the gauntlet of being a Georgia Bulldog. Like, I know it's a privilege. I know that pressure is a privilege, but Kirby Smart don't have to play. He just coaches. So it's the gauntlet of being a Georgia Bulldog, just something to where they, kind of can potentially be a fatal flaw. And like everybody else, the health of JT Daniels, because he didn't play when he first got there because of health. You hope that he can have, a healthy 2021.
Yeah, I understand, a couple of the points. I think Christian makes a good point about the offensive line, and can it be one of those, vintage kind of dominant tone setters that we've seen for Georgia? I think it's fair to have a question or two just about the newness of the secondary. I know we've talked to some analysts who have said, hey, look, JT Daniels was really good in kind of limited stretches last year, but we haven't seen him deal with the offseason of expectations and hype and then kind of the totality of a full season. To me, though, I know this is simplification, and I almost feel bad saying it, but I just can't get past it mentally. You're going to have to beat one of Clemson or Alabama to make the playoff. And it's such a difficult obstacle because no other team in the country is held to that standard. Like if you're Oklahoma, for example, you basically have to beat Iowa State. If you're Clemson, for example, I don't even know that you have to beat Georgia. I just think given that they've made the playoffs 7 years in a row, if Clemson loses to Georgia and wins out and beats everybody by 21 and then wins.
I would say, well, we understand the schedule part of it. I think that's what we understand. They have to beat Alabama and Clemson. I think we're looking at on the roster, what is something that you feel is a weak point there for Georgia that might cost them a game against the Clemson or Georgia or whoever it is.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't think there is a fatal flaw on the roster. I think the fatal flaw is with the infrastructure. I think there are some relative concerns, but I think it was Brooks Austin who said, maybe this is one of the most talented, complete rosters we've seen at Georgia. In terms of trying to find a fatal flaw on the roster, I don't see one. I think there might be a relative question or two, but I don't think there's a fatal flaw. I think the fatal flaw in terms of Georgia's pursuit of a national championship is that you are quite literally the only team in the country that's going to have to beat one of the two modern-day dynasties to advance to the college football playoff. And keep in mind, if you do that, you're then probably going to have to beat one of them again. So to me, in terms of a fatal flaw, I don't see that on the depth chart. I think in terms of the roster and kind of the strengths and weaknesses, I think this is an infinitely talented team. I think there's talent, depth, experience everywhere.
You have to beat them, right? And we were talking about this on second down. Is you have to pretty much be perfect to win a national championship, right? I would describe 2019 LSU and 2020 Alabama as perfect. Those teams were perfect throughout the year. They really didn't have weaknesses, right? So when you're saying, yeah, there's a distinct chance you lose to Alabama or Clemson, well, that would keep you from reaching your goal, which, make no mistake about it, the goal for Georgia in 2020 is winning a national championship. So what group on the roster, when you look at it right now, because you mentioned the secondary, if there's a separation between Georgia and Clemson and Alabama, what would you look at and say, this if I had to pinpoint one group, this is probably what's going to lose the game for them?
I don't think it's a group. I think it's what Ben has said before about Alabama and Clemson is there's kind of an internal understanding that you've been there before and you've done it. In terms of
that could be a fatal flaw.
Yeah, I mean in terms of talent and experience, like if you were to take these 85 players at Georgia and compare them to the 85 players at Alabama, I don't think the recruiting rankings would be that different. Yeah, Alabama might have a couple of more 5 stars, but I don't think the recruiting rankings or the draft results are going to be so, disproportionate that you don't think one team can compete. I really think it just comes down to the totality. I mean, like I've said before, and Ben knows this, it's really hard to go undefeated. Florida's been one of the most dominant programs in the history of college football. They're probably one of the 10 or 12 greatest programs in the history of college football. They've never gone undefeated. The 2 modern day dynasties in college football that are accustomed to the pressure, that are accustomed to overcoming the adversity, that are accustomed and adjusted to making it all the way to the Final Four are Alabama and Clemson. And it is inarguable. Well, I guess there's a possibility LSU or A&M could make the SEC championship, but it is extremely likely you're going to have to beat one of those 2 teams to make it, and you're the only team in the country that has that challenge. So to me, that's the fatal flaw. I don't think it's a roster or depth chart issue.
No, the one thing I know about if you are a player at the University of Georgia is sometimes you just ask yourself this, dude, can we kind of fly under the radar sometimes? They're the biggest brand in the state. JT Daniels, he is the guy for the job. I do think he's the guy for the job. If there is a group, it's got to be the secondary because it's a patchwork secondary. Doesn't mean that they're not good enough to get you there. They weren't there. Some of the guys on your team, none of them have experience in the SEC. One, a couple of the guys wasn't even playing on the team last year. And 2, like I said, you're going to be able to meet good enough talent to beat you. Is your secondary good enough to hold up when, your front 7 can't get there? You can't expect to win every game. And let's say this. We've seen what Georgia looked like in the air raid. His name is Aaron Murray. Can Georgia win the SEC not running the football or getting away from their identity? It's a lot of questions, but I think if it is a group, it's probably going to be the secondary.
We'll see. Again, is that a potential fatal flaw there? We'll look at quickly. Alabama and Clemson, 2 teams you mentioned there for Georgia. Do they have a fatal flaw that might be their undoing in a big game?
I think for Clemson, it's maintaining the edge week to week because we were talking about it even with Brooks Austin. Is Clemson going to be after the first game? Do you guys see anybody that would even be a 10 or 14 point underdog to Clemson? Or are we talking about 21, 28, 30 point underdogs for their opponents all the rest of the way out? I think for Clemson, how do you maintain your edge week to week and play like a championship team when everybody's telling you you're 28 points better than who you're playing?
That being said, if they get in the playoffs, what could be their undoing? Obviously, where you're playing top 4 teams at that point. What's the weak point on their roster that's going to cost them in the playoffs against a top 4 team potentially?
I think a weak point of their roster might be what they think is going to be the strength. That defense is going to be so used to dominating everybody that they go up against to where now they actually got to play 4 quarters. Like, dude, this defense, this offense is good enough to score points. Clemson defense is always going to have one thing that nobody else is going to have. They're going to have the number 1 defensive coordinator in college football. That's not going to change. So when it comes to can the defense be so sophisticated that it doesn't help you win, it actually is the reason why you lose. And I think that if you're only going to meet a team that meet the talent threshold in the playoffs, which is really outside of, because when Trevor Lawrence was a starter, he never lost. DJU, he ain't the reason why they lost against Notre Dame. You're going to meet a team offensively that's good enough to score points on you. Can your defense keep that offense out of the end zone enough for DJU and that Clemson offense to keep you in the game? I think that BJ, as good as that defense is going to be, you only know how good a defense is when the talent threshold on the other side meets that, can stack up with them. I think that might be their fatal flaw because you've gotten so used to dominating. What happens when the guy in front of you can actually have his way with you at least for 4 quarters?
It's going to be interesting thought there to watch Clemson, Alabama, Georgia kind of navigate their rosters and see if there's a potential strength that ends up being a weakness when it comes to a big-time ball game for them here in 2021. We've got more to come here on 3 and Out, counting down towards Braves and Pirates here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.
Kevin. Kevin.
Welcome back to 3 and Out. I am being truth. That is Kevin. You know what it is. Thomas, BJ Bennett.
I feel like
Kevin,
I'm
I
advantaged
mean,
here.
no. I've been because look, 2021 is not. It's not what it is until I hear Kevin's album. And Kevin, once again, tell the listeners when your album is coming out. I get it all the time on social media. When is Kevin's album coming out?
Nebuary.
I mean, it's so nice. I mean, so what comes because it's gonna be like a dual album, like a Christmas album, and like we're getting ready a preseason album. Like, what's up? What's your favorite song on the album?
Yeah, we're gonna remix Baby Shark. We're gonna have ex-producer Jim's dulcet tones littering the album.
No, we
And
only
it'll be
did
out-
that because you said you didn't want us caroling in front of your house.
I don't, but it'll be out in February at a trash can near you. That's where the album. will
Jim's
be out.
very inspiring and uplifting with his vocals.
I mean, Kevin. I mean, I like how Kevin don't realize it at first, and then he had producer Jim go, Kevin, go, oh, man, y'all done snuck that. Yeah, Kevin, like people love your music.
Do they? Do they love good music, or do they just like that?
They love both. I mean, it's like fried chicken versus steak. You only eat the steak if fried chicken ain't available. Like you get the fried chicken.
That's a bad take.
I mean, listen.
Steak will triumph over all.
It will not.
always. Yes, it will.
No, it won't.
Look, it's like going to a cookout and they're like, "Would you like a hot dog or a huge piece of burger?" And the burger wins every time. Like
Does
that's
it?
not even close. Yes.
Not Joey Chestnut will beg to differ with you.
No, Joey Chestnut ain't eating hot dogs outside of the 4th of July. That's it.
Yeah, Joey
The
Chestnut.
average American, what I saw is the average American eats like 70 hot dogs a year. He gets them all in on one day and then he's done. Hamburger.
So what, Kevin? You finally get your you finally make it to the PGA Tour, and then you finally get to make it to the Masters. You picking steak for your meal? That's what you asked to pick?
Yeah. Yeah, we're having filet mignon. No, man, if you can have whatever you want. No, we're not having fried chicken. We're having filet mignon.
You can't
man.
have both.
I mean, I guess you can have
I mean,
both, but that's
Christian's on the
really
tour with
that's
you.
really not the question. The question was, now that's different. Christian is tainting the pool here, about to put this up on the screen for those following online. This is that's an entirely different dish.
Oh my!
That is
That's
fried-
fried chicken is just on top of a
That's fried
Belgian
chick-
waffle.
Fried chicken and waffles is a good dish. Now, if I could have that or steak, I'm still taking steak. But that
Something
kicks
saucy
it up
and
a notch.
sweet.
Yeah. Well, no, that's not what the question was. You and Ben are now learning at the school of BJ Bennett, where you take an argument and then you start adding parameters that were not part of the question and say, "Oh no, that's what we're talking." No, that's not what you're talking about. Okay, now Christian's about to post a picture. I know we got Braves baseball coming up, but if it was this that he's about to share, if you're watching online, this fried chicken or a steak, if it's that or a steak, I'm taking the steak.
Oh my god! Look at man! Ooh, woo.
That's all I'm saying. That's all.
No, that's what I want to ask real quick. What did fried chicken do to you? Did something happen?
No, I didn't say it was like, again, this is one of those arguments like, I didn't say like, hey, throw it in the trash. I'm just saying if you put that next to a, nice medium cooked ribeye steak, I'm taking a steak. Like, that's not even a question.
I mean, are you trying to tell us who you hang around with? You hang around with a bunch of people that can afford ribeye steak. Just go ahead and say that. You don't want to be.
That's
they
true.
They eating chicken over there. Give me the fried chicken.
I think, folks who like steak primarily, tend to be a little bit more with it. A little bit more cool to hang out with.
No, it's okay. No, that's what you're trying to say. Listen, man, I hang around with people that want, the finest cuts of meat. I don't want that yard bird. That's what you're saying.
No, I didn't say I don't want it. I'm saying, but if the choices are steak and that, I'm going to take the steak.
So now I see why you don't go to lunch with us. You're like, man, let's go get some chicken.
That's
Not
right, you want-
today, not me.
Yes. Again, you want
Let me go find some filet mignon real quick. I'll be
only
right
the
back.
finest cuts. Look at that.
Oh, that's
Like,
what you want? That look like a commercial. That's what you like? I mean, it's
yeah.
all good.
I'd rather have that. All right, now the Braves are coming up. Let's hope they have some steak on the mound tonight with Ian Anderson. Yeah. Yeah, they got fried yesterday on the mound.
I was waiting for that. I was waiting for that to come around.
Joke, I stole it, but it's fine. We are looking for a medium performance tonight from everybody involved. Not a rare performance. We want a medium. No, yes. Stop, Christian. Stop. Ian Anderson going tonight. We did find out Pablo Sandoval's on the list just for a couple of days. He's leaving for a personal reason, so he will not be with the team. But the restricted list, he'll be back with the Braves. We got a little more insight there from Brian Sticker. But the Braves got to have it tonight. Can't lose 2 in a row to these Pirates.
Yeah, you need it. And Ian Anderson's kind of become your ace. I mean, you look at his ERA and what he's done this year. 3.35 is really good, especially for a young pitcher. So I think you feel really good about the Pirates offense kind of regressing to the mean. And I think you feel really good about Ian Anderson being effective and being that front end rotation guy. So yeah, I think you get the win tonight. You need it. Let's try to get back to 500. Kevin, are they ever going to have a winning record?
At this point, it seems to be an allergy amongst the Braves organization right now to get to 500 on the season. But we will have Ian Anderson against Chad Kuhl coming up in just a couple of moments. Thanks to Nick Fitzgerald, who joined us, Brooks Austin, who joined us. Check out the podcast if you miss any of that. Afternoon baseball tomorrow. We'll join you following the series finale of Braves Pirates tomorrow afternoon as well, right here on 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.